Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's Vala Perkins of Astrology. We are in our asteroid series. We're going to be talking about the asteroid Juno for the next 4 weeks. Juno is about commitment, and it brings up questions around what you commit to in your life and why you commit to those things. We all have a Venus in our chart, which is what we are attracted to and what we desire and how we wish to be attractive. And then we have a Juno in our charts, which shows us the next level of relationship and how we show up in relationship and how we expect our partners to show up. So it's a really valuable asteroid to know more about. You can go to astro.com and pull your chart, pick extended chart selection, and make sure that you check Juno so that you can get a sense of where Juno lands in your chart. Probably on the 4th episode of Juno, like I did with Vesta, I'll go through Juno houses and signs so that you can get a sense of how it shows up for you in your life. In the meantime, though, if you don't have your hands on my Astrology is a Superpower free ebook, you can get that below in the box. And of course, if you want to schedule with me a private reading or explore mentorships and apprenticeships, you can find me at electraastrology.com. So we're going through the asteroid energies, and asteroids at different parts of our lives have different weight. One of the things that I like about Juno is that all of us have Juno, and we all have a very strong part of us that relates to that Juno energy, and that Juno energy shows up. Today, we're going to talk about Juno as a commitment archetype, why we stay even when it's hard. So again, I'm going to direct you to Demetra George's Asteroid Goddesses book because she has some great information, some of which I'm sharing with you here, especially as I get into the mythology of Juno. Mythologically, Juno was known as the goddess of fidelity and marriage. She was known as the divine protector of marriage. She was married to Jupiter. And what we know about Jupiter is that he loved to have fun. This is a big, expansive energy. And Jupiter loved a good party. And the sense is that he had plenty of infidelity as well. Juno hung around for that. She was intensely loyal and also vengeful. So she brings into the storyline these two things that we all kind of deal with when we are looking at long-term relationships. And it's important to make the distinction here that Juno speaks to who we become or the kind of partner that we become or our partner becomes once we've been together for a while. Unlike Venus, who was all about that attraction and the flirtation, pleasure, you can think about who you were in the first few months or years of a relationship, always showing up, wearing your makeup, looking beautiful, wanting to appear very attractive and desirable. And then you get a few years into a relationship and you begin to be more real. And you even begin to face some of the bigger issues that we all have to face in long-term relationship. And so Juno in the astrology chart can give us a really good baseline into that story. We all seek out long-term relationship because there is something that's very safe about commitment. We start to expand when we are in a long-term relationship because we're no longer having to put up that front and try to be pretty all the time or try to always say the right thing. Instead, we're able to relax a little bit and move more fully into who we are. So there's a lot of different reasons why we would seek out long-term relationship, even though I think we all know that long-term relationship can get really complicated and there's always a lot to the story. And Juno helps us to understand the story of our own relationships, especially the ones that have lasted and endured. It speaks to our commitment style, what we are willing to commit to, and what we put up with in our partners, and then also some of our own shortcomings that we bring into the partnership. Now, ideally, when we get married, we say our vows and we bring in this idea of commitment. I'm going to commit to staying with you, to loving you in sickness and in health. So we set the stage for all of these ways that we're going to show up in commitment. And that works really well. And then we inevitably bump up against these hard edges where we think, I didn't commit to that. I didn't commit to your messiness. I didn't commit to your bad habit of overeating cookies. I didn't commit to you sitting on the couch while I did all the work. Or I didn't commit to you being such a perfectionist, right? And yet at the same time, we let those things go. We let those things slide because we think, I'm in partnership and I did make commitments to stay. So we're talking about what we are willing to endure in a long-term relationship. So when we're looking at Juno in the chart, we're always looking at this spectrum of this is what you do really well. This is how you wish to commit. This is how you wish to show up. And this is what can go wrong if you start to ignore the relationship or if the relationship starts to have issues. We can get a lot of insight into what's going on in the relationship, what the problems are, especially by looking at Juno, because Juno as a goddess was actually quite a force to contend with. She was very jealous, she was punitive, and although on some level she allowed Jupiter to be a philanderer, he was out just doing whatever he wanted to do. And she stayed, she committed, but she would take out her anger at what she had committed to on those around her. She was notoriously jealous and wrathful, especially when it came to Jupiter's other consorts, his illegitimate children, etc. And this is an important connection to make because we commit and we say, it's not that bad. You're a slob. All you do is sit around. I have to nag you all the time. You're always on my case, right? So we commit to these ways of being in relationship because we love our partner. But when we feel betrayed or let down, we can easily slip into being vindictive and being punitive, where we begin to take out our disappointment, our annoyance at the little things that we've committed to on our partner. And Juno in the chart will tell you a lot about how that looks. So some of us just zone out and dissociate, and we're like, leave me alone. I'm not going to listen to you, or I'm going to pretend to not hear what you say. Some of us are very critical and we're on our partners. I reminded you to do that and you didn't do it. Some of us will just be nice and not say anything and just hold grudges, right? We'll score keep. Some of us will go out and hang out with friends instead of being at home, right? It's like we all have these ways of getting back at our partner for the commitments that we've made that weren't part of our big commitment to love and cherish and honor. And so we're looking at all of these different versions of commitment. How do we each on a personal level begin to break down? Because it's not always the other partner, it is also us. So in the case of Juno, yes, her husband was having affairs, having illegitimate children, but Juno stayed. She was devoted to him, but was it devotion or was it self-sacrifice? So we're up against these questions in our own lives when it comes to certain parts of relationship. And like you've heard me say, the asteroids come in a lot heavier during different time periods in our lives. So your marriage, your long-term partnership might just be chugging along beautifully. And in that case, you're not paying that much attention to Juno. But as soon as you start to have issues in the partnership, you can begin to look at Juno and say, all right, what is my part in this? Because we each have a personal part where we are either perpetuating the bad behavior, even if it's not our bad behavior, or we have to look at our commitment. Is it noble? I made a commitment, I'm going to stay, or is it self-abandonment? I am so angry, I am so mad that my partner is doing XYZ, and yet I'm just going to stick it out and I'm going to act out. So that's what we look at with Juno is how do you act out, right? How do you get revenge? How do you show your partner, usually in very subtle ways, sometimes not, that you're angry, that they're letting you down? A lot of times with Juno, there isn't necessarily the direct communication. It's like the I'm going to show them devotion and wrath, nurturing and vengeance, right? So take a deep breath into that and think about how those things show up in your own partnership. So another thing that I can say is that we're not always looking at the relationship on the verge of crumbling when we're looking at Juno. A lot of times this stuff can show up just in very subtle and consistent ways where you're a little bit unhappy because you don't feel like you actually committed to this thing that this person is doing and you're in this relationship with them. And so you have these little ways of sort of getting back at them or checking out of the relationship, getting frustrated. It's where we become enraged with inequality that happens. And we, in an attempt to make things balanced and fair and right, we may ideally we want to compromise, but before we can get to that compromising spot, we have to get awareness first before we can compromise, right? And that's part of why looking at your Juno is so helpful because when you can see with objectivity, ooh, I'm acting out, or oh, wow, I have a habit of doing this. And a lot of times when I'm doing chart readings for people and I'm pointing out what's going on with their Juno, it's really interesting for them. They're not revelations that had necessarily occurred to them, but they make sense of it and they make a connection and they say, wow, I do that. And so we say with Juno, when you find yourself acting out the shadow side of your Juno, that's an indication that you are stressed and that you want to go back and revisit the commitments because commitments can shift and change. What we're looking for with Juno ideally is a sense of give and take in partnership. We're looking at how to peacefully relate with our partner so that it can be long term. Because we know that with long term relationships, the longer they are, there's a deepening. There is an intimacy that's developed long after we go through all of the Venus stuff of attraction and flirtation and whatnot. The longer that we're able to maintain a healthy partnership with somebody, the deeper we can go, the more we get to know each other, the more that we're actually able to overlook some of their bad habits that drive us crazy and kind of laugh it off. But in order to get there, it takes this constant work, this constant connection around this archetype of, look, I made a commitment to you, but here's what I need from you. Or here's what I notice about myself that I'm withholding from you. And I want to start giving more of this to you, but I need to feel that you're giving something to me in return because we don't want to get into self-sacrifice in our relationships. That inevitably breaks us. And we do want to practice devotion. And the kind of devotion that's required in a long-term relationship means that we have to keep going back. We have to keep going back and revisiting and repairing and having the communication, which when we look at the lighter or more exalted side of your Juno, it really shows here's where your skills are. Here's what you can do to repair, to deepen in, to advocate for the kind of relationship that you want, the kind of commitment that you want to have with this partner. So think for a minute about your long-term relationship. And if you aren't currently in one, maybe you've had one in the past, think about some of the things that you felt that you had committed to that eventually ended up going wrong, or the things that right now currently are driving you crazy. And then think about how you handle that. Are you handling it through the lens of being an irritated, wrathful, annoyed, scrutinizing Juno energy? And if so, how is that working for you? Are you able to get your needs met when you are showing up and being crabby, demanding, and critical? Or maybe you can think of another example where you were able to get to a place with your partner where you understood that you had differences and that your partner had limitations, and so did you, and that you were able to overlook those and still continue to nurture the partnership in a way that's really helpful. Because we all know that there are things that we want, like loyalty and compassion, mercy, serenity. But it's very hard to feel loyalty when we're also feeling resentment, to tap into compassion when we're also feeling fury, to be tender when we are also experiencing ferocity over being annoyed about something. So this archetype is teaching us about how to get more of what we want without being controlling and approaching our partnerships through that lens of turmoil. Because inevitably, our long-term partnerships, they are going to let us down. We are going to get bored. We are going to experience a lack of intimacy. We are going to get annoyed with how our partners are conducting their lives in terms of their mess and their toothpaste on the sink, etc. There are just parts of being human that can be very annoying. And yet, if we're trying to cultivate these longer relationships, it can be valuable to get in there and learn how to relax, learn how to hold the other with loving compassion. And if you do hit a point in a relationship where you did not commit to that, maybe there is infidelity or betrayal, maybe they have not committed to you, then you know when to get out. And you don't want to hang around for so long that you're just walking around like a ticking time bomb. So, as we dive into Juno over the next several weeks, it's good to start looking at your relationships through this lens of wanting to be more self-aware. How do I commit? What happens? How do I react when my love, affection, attention are not returned in the way that I want them to be? How have I handled small betrayals over the years? How is my communication? Am I nurturing? Do I feel nurtured? These are all the deeper relationship questions. We have been doing so much relationship work over these past several years with all of the Venus things, the North Node being in Taurus, bringing up Venus themes, the South Node being in Libra. We are coming up, I'm filming this in February of 2025. We're coming up on a Venus retrograde in the next few months. So the Venus themes that relate to our values, well, we're also doing Juno work, trying to understand what we commit to. What have we gotten ourselves into? Are we willing to stay? And are we holding up our end of the bargain? All right, I hope this was helpful, and I'll talk to you soon.